In 1966, Adam West signed what appeared to be a dream contract. He became a household name quickly thanks to Batman. Sales of products from the show totaled $3.5 billion. Costumes, lunchboxes, and action figures were flying off the shelves all across the world. A 5% share of all merchandising profits was pledged to West. But when he checked his bank account, there was nothing. The studio had stolen everything by using only one word in his contract. That word opened up a terrible loophole that permanently altered Hollywood. Even if what they did to West was entirely lawful, it was nonetheless illegal. On September 19, 1928, he was born William West Anderson in Walla Walla, Washington. While his mother Audrey, a trained opera singer and pianist, never gave up on her Hollywood aspirations, his father Otto put in long hours caring for apple orchards. After pursuing fame herself, she sacrificed it to raise her sons. She was erratic, artistic, and dramatic at home. Later on, Adam would characterize her as gifted but tormented, stuck in a vicious cycle of sadness and drunkenness. Nevertheless, she gave him something despite the confusion: a need to be noticed and a thirst for performance. He received structure from his calm and stable father. The deeper impact, however, was his mother's peculiar blend of ambition and melancholy. At the age of 10, he picked up a copy of Detective Comics one day, in 1938. They were 27 years old. A dark guy wearing a cape leaped across rooftops on the cover. Batman made his debut. He was drawn in by the logic, the darkness, and the secret of it all. He had never before realized that heroes didn't have to be loud or unbeatable. They might be astute. They might be haunted. He pretended to be inside the panels, mimicked voices, acted out situations in the backyard, and read those comics non-stop. It was more than amusement. It served as an escape plan. But at 15, his parents' marriage disintegrated. He moved to Seattle after leaving Walla Walla with his mother and younger brother. His mother remarried Dr. Paul Flothow, a neurosurgeon, and they moved into a huge stone home. As if attempting to create the life she was never able to complete, Audrey started hosting parties once more, packing the house with musicians and artists. Now a teenager, West was taking everything in. Seattle was louder, faster, and different than the calm fields of his childhood. His new classrooms were radio stations and theaters. The pulse of the metropolis started to mold him. He was a bit crazy. He was expelled from Walla Walla, where he had begun high school. He then had more difficulties in Seattle's upscale prep school, Lakeside School. He and his friend Harry Hutchinson stole a school bus one evening and drove it all the way to Tacoma for champagne and chicks. He talked his way back in when the school was about to expel him once more. He was allowed to remain, but he had to live with a stern math teacher. He prospered in spite of all the turmoil: school plays, student government, and sports. He gained recognition for his silky, deep voice. He embraced his cowboy charm and was referred to by friends as Tex Anderson. He learned how to manage an audience at Lakeside. After graduation, he returned to Walla Walla and enrolled at Whitman College. He joined Beta Theta Pi and studied psychology and literature. After joining the speaking team, he discovered that performance and persuasion appealed to him. He wed Billie Lou Jorger, a fellow student, in 1950 during his senior year. She was just 17. To keep food on the table, he worked in canneries and ranches during summers. He saved money for Stanford by working as a radio broadcaster after graduating from college. But he drifted rather than enrolled. One summer, he spent most of his time sunbathing while feigning to be a student at UC Santa Barbara. He had not yet determined what he was pursuing. The Korean War broke out in 1951. Despite being drafted, he never served on the front lines. His voice was used instead. He was hired by the Army to work as an on-air announcer for the American Forces Network. He spent 2 years presenting news, weather, and morale-boosting shows from locations in California and New Jersey. It was more than just service. It served as his practice area. He gained experience writing scripts, speaking in front of an audience, and maintaining focus. These lengthy days at AFN were laying the groundwork for his future profession, even though he was unaware of it at the time. After being released in 1953, he returned home and accepted a position as a milkman. The labor was unappreciated. He never quit working despite the long routes, early mornings, and sore arms. In the dark, he would deliver milk before rushing to radio stations for auditions. He received a few local advertisements and tiny gigs thanks to his voice. Persuaded that something would break, he continued. He assured his friends that he would stop at nothing to make Hollywood a reality, for even a man driving a milk truck. He was prepared for a further leap by 1954. He, Billy, and their 2 children packed up and relocated to Hawaii. He was hired there as a sidekick for the Kinipopo Show, a peculiar children's show with a monkey named Peaches. West talked to children via the screen, improvised sketches while on broadcast, and ad-lib jokes. The laughter was genuine despite the little production. He started hosting in 1956 and was paid $50 Siri program. The limelight was beginning to find him, but that money didn't go very far. The island audience adored his timing, voice, and erratic appeal as his confidence rose. After gaining some success, he changed his name in 1957. Adam West was born William West Anderson. He required something rhythmic and distinctive. His desired image was reflected in the new name: traditional, tough, and a little enigmatic. His marriage started to fall apart that same year. The frequent journeys from Hawaii to Los Angeles became tiresome. He auditioned for pilots. He slept on couches. He was a letter writer. He called. It was exhausting. It was worth it, he persuaded himself. Every turndown seemed like an exam. His first Hollywood role occurred in 1959. It was tiny. In Paul Newman's film, The Young Philadelphians, he portrayed a courtroom onlooker. He received $200 for 2 days of filming, but he exploited that credit to land parts in westerns like Bonanza. He specialized in playing cunning outlaws and gamblers. He portrayed Doc Holliday in Sugarfoot, Colt 45, and Lawman between 1959 and 1961. People noticed that he had a way of saying lines that stuck, even though these weren't the main parts. He was constructing something. He eventually got his first movie lead in 1962. In the sweltering heat of Utah, Gono is a western. West played Captain Starbucks alongside Chuck Connors. For the part, he was paid $5,000. It was the highest amount he had ever made. The shoot was arduous with 6 weeks of sunburn and dust, but it demonstrated he could carry a film. In 1964, he portrayed an enigmatic alien on The Outer Limits, and a charming villain on Perry Mason. He was no longer typecast. He could do drama, humor, and science fiction. He might blend in with his roles. Hollywood, however, was erratic. He was cast alongside Steve McQueen and Jackie Gleason in the comedy drama Soldier in the Rain in 1963. West portrayed an eccentric sergeant. Despite the failure of the film, he remained proud of the job. Against a budget of $2 million, it only generated $1.5 million. Worse, West had spent $1,200 moving to law for the part. He was in debt after the failure. To stay afloat, he frantically sought for TV guest parts. He continued to pursue, always one position away. Adam West was cast as Major Dan McCready in Robinson Crusoe on Mars in 1964, beneath the blazing sun of Death Valley, California. With a budget of $1.5 million, it was a low-budget science fiction movie. Additionally, West and his co-star, Paul Manti, lived in neighboring towns for 12 weeks in a row, traveling through the desert every day to film scenes that required grit. For the part, West received $15,000. It wasn't glitzy. He leaned into it with a quiet determination, despite the scorching winds, unending sand, and early dawn calls. Even though his character passed away early in the movie, his little on-screen time had an impact. His realistic portrayal helped ground a story about distilling oxygen from rocks and making friends with a monkey, according to critics who applauded his realism. Because director Byron Haskin knows how to make something small feel huge, he combined repurposed miniatures from the War of the Worlds and homemade models to create the practical effects in the movie. Some of the same survival ideas would be used in films like The Martian years later. In 1965, a year later, West made a dramatic comeback to the big screen. He co-starred with the Three Stooges in their last movie, The Outlaws Is Coming. The budget was barely $500,000, but it hauled in $2 million at the box office. West portrayed Kenneth Kitt, an inexperienced marshal, enmeshed in a flurry of comedic mayhem. Much of his act was improvised, with him racing horses around dusty sets and having pies in his face. But something odd caught his attention behind the scenes. When the cameras weren't filming, the notoriously insane Stooges were rather somber. Moe once made a joke about serving buffalo meat at a BBQ. That was the type of set. West's enthusiasm complemented the film's meta-aware aesthetic flawlessly. Fans would consider this to be one of his most endearing roles years later. That same year, 1965, West got a call that could have changed everything. After Sean Connery left, he received an invitation to try out for James Bond. West took a plane to London, read passages from Thunderball, and left empty-handed. The tux would finally be worn by George Lenby. West subsequently described the encounter as humbling. It not only damaged his pride but also changed the course of his career. He shifted his focus to character work and abandoned his attempts to be a traditional action star. The pain of losing Bond didn't last forever. When he was briefly considered for Diamonds Are Forever in the 1970s, he declined, arguing that Bond ought to be British. Something significant was made clear at that moment. West had come to terms with his identity. However, 1964 had handed West another unanticipated break, even before the Bond dream died. In the Act of God episode of The Detectives, he portrayed a charming con artist. ABC producers were looking for someone who could portray a serious figure in a goofy outfit, and they were drawn to his smooth baritone and composed assurance. A door was opened by that one performance. Pitching him as the only actor who could balance camp and earnestness, West's agency seized the opportunity. West soon found himself on the short list for a future television program about a billionaire who disguised himself as a bat. The contract was signed in the end of 1965, $350 series episode for 7 years. Although it wasn't a star's salary, it was sufficient to secure West's contract with Greenway Productions. He put the costume on in October. It weighed a lot. On grueling 12-hour shoot days under scorching lights, the 40-pound cowl alone put strain on his neck. However, when Batman debuted on January 12, 1966, none of that mattered. 20 million people watched the first episode of Hi Diddle, Riddle. It was effective when West deadpanned his remarks, such as the now famous, "Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb." His greatest talent proved to be his humorous timing, something the producers had questioned. Batman was the 7th most popular television program in the United States by the middle of 1966. Initially, West earned $4,000 for each two-parter, or $2,000 for each episode. He negotiated a raise to $2,150 by the end of the first season. Even still, it required little sleep, 2 episodes a week of filming, and the suffocating suit beneath heat lamps. His physical condition started to deteriorate. Every action scene was a struggle against discomfort, since the cowl restricted his neck movement. His salary eventually caught up to that of Batgirl actress Yvonne Craig. However, Robin's actor Burt Ward wasn't as fortunate. Despite appearing in almost every scene, he began earning only $350 series episode, and only made $450 at the finale. Even worse, despite Batman toys bringing in an estimated $3.5 billion by 1970, he made nothing from merchandising. Ward famously remarked, "Even the hairdresser got paid more than I did." West supported the show's loud, flashy, and comic book parodying use of pow and bam effects. The daring set design led to Emmy nominations. Episodes were hurried during the 1967 writers' strike, and West and Ward frequently had to improvise. Statements like "as holy sardine," Batman became crowd favorites. West did more than fight for his own salary behind the scenes. During the strike, he stood next to Yvonne Craig in a public service announcement, calling for equal pay for women in Hollywood. The stunt wasn't pre-planned. Those who assumed West was merely another costume performer were taken aback by the genuine stand. West made his big screen debut in the Batman film in July 1966. He accepted $100,000 instead of the $150,000 she had requested. His eyebrows were almost burned off during a fictitious submarine explosion during filming. Despite the ridiculousness of the dehydrator plotline villains reducing victims into dust, the fans adored it. The $1, gadgets, settings, and the Batboat and Batcopter that would ultimately be featured in the show were all covered by the $5 million budget. With over 1.2 million tickets sold at $150 each, the first week's ticket sales totaled 1.9 million. Already, the merchandiser was booming. The Batman brand brought approximately $3.5 billion by 1970. In addition to lunchboxes, action figures, and the iconic Batmobile toy filling shelves, children donned capes to school. With its gadgets and utility belt, the perfect Captain Action Batman outfit was a bestseller. At auction, one unopened package would fetch $3.50. The plan was brilliant. Upsell the costume packs indefinitely after selling one toy. This formula would be imitated by later brands like Lego and Funko Pop. That same summer, West's fame reached its zenith. 500 autographs every day, TV interviews, and magazine covers. Once while eating, his fingers cramped from signing so many. He received a $50,000 offer to promote a serial with a Batman theme. Fearful of being made fun of, he declined. He had no desire to serve as a mascot. Rather, he cautiously controlled his notoriety, remaining noticeable without going bonkers. The Riddler's chessboard trap, the film's most well-known moment, wasn't even in the original script. After seeing early audience responses to wordplay, director Leslie Martinson and the actors improvised it. Puns flew as they leaned in. The actor who played the Riddler, Frank Gorshin, made every tape into a joke. It was all Batman, chaotic, vibrant, and astute. It was more than just amusement. It altered the way superhero stories might be written by skillfully fusing humor and peril. Then followed the July 1966 Times Square debut in New York. The theater was overrun by over 15,000 people. The police were powerless to stop them. It was necessary to sneak West in from the back. He did not attend the celebration. He didn't miss the event, but he did miss the red carpet. The craziest fan frenzy since Beatlemania, according to newspapers. Adam West realized what Batman had become that evening. He was at the epicenter of a cultural explosion, not simply a TV show. The promise seemed straightforward enough when Adam West signed his contract for the Batman television series in 1966. 5% of the merchandise profits associated with their likenesses were promised to him and Burt Ward. It seemed like a just compensation for representing a cultural phenomena. However, the reality was obscured by a tangle of technicalities. As Batman gained worldwide popularity, and items such as masks, action figures, lunchboxes, Halloween costumes, and even breakfast cereal began to flood the market. West and Ward hadn't made a dime by the time goods sales topped $3.5 billion. It was not necessary for the producers at 20th Century Fox and ABC to violate the contract in order to deceive them. They simply redefined everything sold as promotional tie-ins rather than actual items, and funneled the proceeds through companies. West and Ward's portion legally disappeared, as the studio itself never sold these promos. It was more than a ruse. It was a system designed to ensure that the performers never came into contact with the money they owed. The damage had already been done when the Screen Actors Guild ultimately declared it unethical in the 1970s. The performers had nothing but unfulfilled promises after being locked out. Adam West discovered the extent of the betrayal, revealed bank records, revealed the entire magnitude of the merchandising earnings, and validated his long-held suspicions in 1968. He was so incensed that he sued Greenway Productions for $1 million. However, justice arrived in silence. An out-of-court settlement was reached. Although the amount was kept under wraps, sources verified that it was less than $100. According to West's attorney, that amount was insignificant compared to what he was actually due. The number wasn't the only thing that hurt, it was the quiet. Strict confidentiality was used in the settlement to conceal the truth. Knowing that he had been duped and instructed to go on, West was left to bear the consequences. Then the blow struck, causing the wound to reopen. Burt Ward revealed the reality to the world in 1989, at a televised reunion on The Late Show. He acknowledged on television that after 1970, neither of them had received merchandise royalties or residuals. There were replays everywhere. Millions of dollars were being made by TV networks. However, each of West and Ward received a $5,000 annual check. The audience chuckled uncomfortably, but West remained expressionless. Years passed, as he was in a silent despair. He stopped going to events involving Batman. He distanced himself from the very persona that had made him famous in the first place. Money wasn't the only factor. It was about being cast aside, about dignity. The flaw that made it all possible wasn't unique. The promotional tie-in justification was used by Hollywood studios to avoid paying actors royalties. They avoided whole sections of normal contracts by categorizing games, shirts, and toys as marketing instead of retail. It was more than just shrewd accounting. The exploitation was intentional and purposeful. Additionally, it meant years of unpaid work for actors like West and Ward while executives received bonuses. For many, it was too late when the Screen Actors Guild decided against it. The decision turned into a sobering lesson for the upcoming generation of celebrities. Something considerably more embarrassing was discovered during a studio audit in 1969. By the third season, Adam West was only earning $2,250 per episode, despite being the face of one of the most watched television programs. According to the audit, this sum was only 10% of the money the network had made from his public celebrity. He wasn't simply underpaid, In addition, he was paying taxes on his notoriety. He owed money for the fame that came with being Batman. He was left with the bill when others became wealthy due to his recognition. He eventually had to sell his house in Hollywood in order to make ends meet. Adam West anticipated that new doors would open once the Batman series concluded in 1968, but they slammed shut instead. Viewers were unable to distinguish him from the Cape. Casting agents muttered that he was too Batman for true drama, and directors didn't want a cartoonish hero in their serious movies. West attempted to disprove them. He tried out more than 50 times for important parts, such as The Godfather. Nothing touched down. The industry carried on without him, and he became a relic of a fading trend. He was well known due to one role, however, he was now confined by that same role. He was embarrassed, broke, and typecast. The spiral also became personal by the early 1970s. With every rejection piercing his heart more deeply, he began to drink excessively. He was turned down by more than 20 pilots. In order to pay his rent, he was accepting scraps and guest slots on shows. He portrayed a crazed firefighter on the set of Emergency in 1972, but he was so inebriated that he was unable to recall his lines. 10 takes were needed for the sequence. Halfway through, he lost consciousness. That day revealed not just how far he had fallen, but also how internally damaged he felt. He later acknowledged that he was at the end of his rope and was unsure if he would ever return. A woman remained in the midst of that mayhem. He wed Marcel Tagender, a fashion designer who was unconcerned with the spotlight in Hollywood, in 1970. Even though she could see the man wearing the mask, the crash nevertheless happened. He was arrested for DUI in 1974, when he crashed his vehicle into a studio gate while intoxicated. He was startled that night. Rehab came next. It wasn't flawless or instantaneous, but it was genuine. He began slowly, piece by piece, to rebuild himself under Marcel's care. The industry continued to make fun of him even after he recovered. He performed an espionage parody titled The Specialist in 1976. Only $10,000 was paid. Batman was continuously made fun of in the writing. West detested it. He claimed that he felt like a joke because of the jokes. His wrath erupted when the movie failed. He seemed to be a parody of himself in everything he did. Cheesy cameos, voice acting, and walk-on performances. He was constantly reminded by them that nobody could see behind the cape. He was worn out by 1980. He has made more than a dozen cameos that ridiculed his legacy. Even the Love Boat made fun of him by portraying him as a shabby superhero impersonator. There were 15 comparable roles. He considered calling it quits. Suicide became a real possibility. Marcel stepped in once more. She encouraged him to go to treatment. Career was no longer the main concern. It was about surviving. And he started to ascend gently out of that darkness. The Simpsons, the last place he expected, provided a spark in 1992. In Radio Bart, he narrated a self-deprecating version of himself. His fee for each presentation was $20,000. The true victory wasn't that. The fact that he laughed at himself for the first time was the true victory. He leaned into the joke with control rather than as a punchline. He repeated it when he came back in 2002 for Tales from the Couch. A single line remained. No, I'm not Batman. There was strength in that laugh. Family Guy followed. He was chosen to play Mayor Adam West in 2000. It was merely a role at first, but it quickly evolved into the role. He remained for 17 seasons. He was allowed to improvise on stage. His strange, ridiculous one-liners won his fans. I'm the mayor of this town, for example, had people laugh not at him, but with him. He was making $50,000 per episode by 2010. He did more than simply revitalize his career over 118 episodes. He changed who he was. He was invited back again by Johnny Bravo in 1997 and 2004, but this time he obtained artistic control. He was supposed to be more than a joke. His voice was a parody of Batman, yet he meant every word. He straddled the divide between self-respect and nostalgia. To demonstrate that he was more than simply Batman, he even provided the voices of alluring villains. He provided the voice of Sprig Spivak on The Fairly Odd Parents, from 2003 to 2008. Children adored him. The subtle allusions to Batman were noticed by adults. He received a Kids' Choice Award nomination in 2005. Go Young, Westman, the May 9th episode, quickly became a fan favorite. He mocked childhood anxieties and portrayed a younger version of himself. It was sincere. It was shrewd. The world eventually gave him his flowers on April 5, 2012. On the Hollywood Walk of Fame, he was awarded a star, There were more than 200 fans. He grinned in the sun and talked about his days as a caped crusader. Adam West was written on the plaque, nothing more. That celebrity increased his annual convention earnings to $100,000. He had made 156 appearances as Batman on cinema. That was an important number. It demonstrated that he was a generation's face. But something else was developing inside of him all along. He was given a chronic lymphocytic leukemia diagnosis at the beginning of 2017. He didn't tell anyone, not even Gary Sr.'s pals. He only revealed the truth 6 weeks prior to his passing. He did not have rigorous treatment, but he did receive light chemotherapy. He did not wish to suffer in his last days. He couldn't fend off infection since his body was too weak. Cardiovascular failure due to septic shock was the official cause. West looked fantastic. According to Burt Ward, who had visited him weeks before, and had been informed that he might have 3 to 5 more years to live. However, Adam West died on June 9, 2017, at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 88. He was accompanied by his wife Marcelle and all 6 of their children. In that hospital bed, his final words were a gentle reminder to the youngster who had changed in a fire pole room under Wayne Manor. Following his passing, the bat signal was shown on Los Angeles City Hall. He remarked, "To the bat pole." Whitman Tower was illuminated by Walla Walla, his hometown. An old clip was used in a tribute episode of Family Guy. It was viewed by more than 7 million people. "Thank you, Adam West" became a global trending hashtag. Quahog High School was even renamed Adam West High in the show. His earnings from convention appearances and residuals had grown to $8 million by that point. But after his death, a secret was revealed. He had lost out on around $20 million in royalties from Batman. Producers were granted lifetime rights to his image in 1960s contracts, but they were not paid residuals. Each time a Batman rerun was broadcast, or a product was offered for sale, he received